Hey, what's up everybody? Welcome to the Rules of Engagement. As always, I'll be your host, Nick, axslav, ranish, to take a look at strategies and tactics used in the game of Starcraft 2. Then we're going to take a look at games focused on another one of your players you'll see this weekend in the WCS American Premier League playoffs. It's going to be Ryung. We're going to take a look at 3 of Ryung's games from the round of 16 Group D. First, we're going to take a look at 2 of his games versus Polt and talk about controlling expansions and do an economic focus opening versus a containment focused opening. Then we're going to talk about how to create a weakness in one of his matches against Alive on Akalon Waste. After these 3 segments, it's going to be the viewer Q&A, so submit any questions you have to me on Twitter at @ISAxslav. Also, leave them in the YouTube comments under youtube.com/official. MLGSC2, go ahead and find any Rules of Engagement video. Leave your question there and I'll answer it on the next episode of Rules of Engagement. Our first topic is going to be about controlling expansions in his game 2 against Polt. He had lost the first game. One thing about these games are actually incredibly complex. There's so much to go over. I can't really cover the entirety of these series, so go ahead and check them out, youtube.com/official MLGSC2. Just search for Ryung, search for Polt, search for WCS America Premier League. All these things will find you these games. There's some awesome games, so go check out the full games in depth if you want more. But we're going to talk about map vision, then we're going to talk about map control, and then also how to properly choke out your opponent on a map in TVT, basically getting small advantages over time, tidying that chokehold over the map to deny your opponent expansions. So we're starting this game actually pretty far into it. We're going to start at the 14-minute mark, and at this time in the game, many games have already been decided. But this game, not too much has happened. If you look at units lost, you know, both players have done some mild harass with Banshees and whatnot. You can see here a couple workers killed from one side, most units being killed. Pretty minor effects so far in this game. And I want to talk about right now how important map vision is. Because at this moment in time, if we take a look at Polt's vision, right? Polt has vision up here on this top route, but no vision along this whole bottom route. On the other hand, Ryung, he's got vision partially on both routes. And you can see the sensor tower helps out as well there. And what's super important about this is that on this map, early on, if you look at Neoplanet S, right, and you're saying, okay, there's so many opportunities I can have where I just instantly win the game if I get into this position. These opportunities are, okay, if I can load all my units to medevacs, let's say I'm in the top right as my main base. If I load all my units to medevacs, and I just send them, boop, across the middle, load into his base. If I get them all unloaded before he sees them, I win the game. Another chance, what if I just head around the top, I grab this position right here, and all of a sudden, if I have siege tanks there, he can't move between his natural and third base. He's stuck to 2 bases. I win the game. The same thing again over here. If you get your units right here, same thing exactly. I can shut off movement between his natural and third base. I win the game. There's so many opportunities where positional play is so important in TVT because positioning is important. Every unit has high damage output, and if they're set up in a good position, it's very hard to break that position. And so map vision is insanely important. If your opponent's trying to go over one of these routes, you have to know they're doing it. At the same hand, you can't go over this top route unless you know your opponent is not waiting to counterattack you up along the bottom route, right? So if you try to go over the top and your opponent, let's say, as you're red going over the top, I will erase this bottom route just to make it a little bit clearer. If you're red going over the top of the middle and your opponent is kind of waiting over here, and as soon as you leave your base, they just pop up right in and kill you before you're ready for it, that's not good. So map vision is insanely, insanely important on any map in TVT, but particularly Neoplanet S. So as you jump into the game, we can keep that in mind, because from this position going forward here, the position Ryung's in is, Ryung says, you know what? I think it'd be cool if I could attack my opponent. And because I have this Widow Mine here, keep in mind the fact that there's no giant army moving up this way. I know he has some forces over here. I can afford to send a good chunk of my forces here, knowing that there's no major attack along this way. And what's very important here is this sensor tower. This sensor tower allows him to know there's no medevacs that are coming up right through the middle and dropping into his main. So all this map vision is extremely, extremely important. And it's the map vision that allows you to make decisions on, can I move out across this left side of the map? And right now, Ryung says, yes, I can. If, for example, he was right here, and all of a sudden Polt showed up with an army right here, the game would be over, Ryung would lose. But that's why this map vision provided by the Widowmine is so exceptionally important. It allows him to move over here and move out here. On the same hand, for Polt's perspective, Polt doesn't have the map vision on the right or left side very much, so his army has to be defensive, which is fine. It's fine to be defensive, but it means that he can't afford to move out. He has to be able to react to attacks like this coming from the top over here. Very, very, very important. As we can see going on here, Ryung is just going to try to take this position, choke off this right base, and then from here on, he can do this again because he has a map vision. You can see Polt trying to make sure that there's nothing going down the middle drop-wise to kind of cut through and nail his third base, and just defend this angle over here. And Ryung's using his Cloak Banshee to try to break the siege tank line of Polt. That's one of the most effective tactics, actually, to break siege tank lines, is use a Banshee, because the Marines can't run forward and shoot the Banshee because all these tanks here, we can see their range of these tanks is pretty much just right at the edge of Polt's tanks. So going forward, the next step you can see here is, of course, what's happening here is Polt is trying to move over to the right. And this is why it's so important. Ryung with this huge army over here. Imagine if he didn't have that that Widowmine right here that spotted his force. All of a sudden, he wouldn't know about it until it's right at his doorstep. If this army had moved out to reinforce the left side, he'd basically be in very big trouble. So because he has that Widowmine, he can go ahead, re-siege up, reposition his forces, and even more importantly, he can know to pull back this force. And why is it so important to pull back this force? Well, let's just bring up the map and let's say, okay, I'm Ryung, right? And I have my army. Oops, sorry. Get rid of this. I have my army over here, and I have another army over here, right? And if I don't know my opponent is heading up along this path, maybe I can defend my natural with the army I banked up there. But what if he just comes around here, and all of a sudden then he has his army back there defending? He hits me from two sides. I lose a giant force of siege tanks very cost and efficiently from just fighting two armies with only one of mine. I could lose the game. So that's why it's so important that he had that Widowmine over here at the bottom right. So at the instant that Polt's army came up here, he could say, okay, I know he's over there on the map, and all I have to do is simply retreat this army before it could potentially be cut off. Or better yet, siege it up and control this ramp. Maybe he wants to reform the armies. Either way, make sure this army doesn't get cut off undefeated. As soon as his opponent was navigating in a way that he could cut through the middle and potentially flank, Ryung identified that and backed away pronto. And more importantly, he knew the army was on the right side, so he was able to react to this drop play over here. Drop play is still extremely effective from Polt, because what's really important right here is you think about the way he's positioning his forces. This is how you can really use concave to your true advantage, because if you take a look at the situation with the base and where Ryung's forces are, we can again we'll bring back up this screen here. He's using the buildings against him, so the drop play is great because he's able to sneak around the side of the map. Ryung would have instantly lost this game if he didn't have that map vision. Because he had the map vision, he can still get back in time to defend, but unfortunately he didn't have his units quite fast enough to prevent the drop or kill the medevacs, and so he's stuck in this position where initially, remember, he had his units in this arc fighting an opponent's army that was in this arc, and all of a sudden, you know, if you draw a range of 5 here, there's a lot more Marines shooting on the right side of that line down the left side. And now to counteract that, you can see what Ryung's done is he's sent these units down into the right so he can get them all in the fight, but this costs him extra time to do that. He's taking a few extra hits. Overall, a great drop by Polt. Not only is he be fairly cost efficient if he can escape with the medevacs, but he's also keeping his opponent back on the defensive angle where now he can move up and attack. So that's exactly what we can see going on here. Going forward, Ryung's of course going to be able to clean this up just because he has his full army back here to defend it, and Polt only has a few units. Siege tanks are going to provide fire and as Polt backs up. And Polt says, you know what, I know now it's in a very open area. I don't have that concave advantage. So instead he's just going to try to kill a couple key upgrades, which are very important. Then he should try to jet out of here. Now it's uncertain if he can pick up units and jet out. Regardless of the medevacs have to get out of there, and if he can pick up anybody, it looks like he picked up 8 of the Marines and a few stayed back to make sure the medevacs didn't die. And then again, remember, the whole army of Ryung was busy dealing with that, so it's allowed Polt to move across the left side of the map and get in this great position. And I mean, Ryung, of course, is so fast in responding. He had a Marine over here that kept track of things, and so he was able to defend this choke point. Now we're at a very interesting point in the game, because right here, we're both players, you know, this third base can't be entirely denied because the tank line can't be broken. But this tank line can't be broken either. Both sides are too hard to break. There's enough Marines there to stop dropping on top of the units. There's enough tanks there to make it extremely inefficient to try to break it by brute force. And this is where map control is super important. So if we talk about map control, and both players have realized no one's going to die very soon, right? Both players, no one's making a critical mistake. The Doom drop was deflected. It gave Polt an upgrade advantage, and that he killed one of those important eBays. But going forward, he's not going to instantly end the game from an advantage like that. And now you talk about what parts of the map do both players control, right? So if we're talking about Ryung, he has a force right here, and then the rest of his force is right here, right? So he really only controls 3 bases at the given moment. If you talk about Polt, where Polt controls, he has an army tied up here. And this army, basically, he has another army here. It's very difficult. If Ryung tried to come across the left side of the map, right, if he tried to go this way with this army, first of all, he would lose his third base, right? The third base would be forfeit. And then, even once the third base is forfeit, he could be stuck in a position where this army would come in here, and then it would camp off in this location and choke off this area, and Ryung's force would basically be cornered and could eventually be surrounded and taken out. So, because of this fact, Polt has the entire left side of the map. But also, because he has so many units locked up on the left side, you can see Polt basically has this chunk of the map on lockdown, right? But because he has these units tied up on the left side, Ryung can very easily take the right side of the map. And it's very important to understand what parts of the map you control, what parts of the map you could potentially easily control in about 30 seconds to a minute down the road, because if you can understand that point, that's what often determines the game. It's saying, okay, I can easily take these parts of the map, that's where I'm going to expand. These parts my opponent can control, I'm not going to try to fight in that direction. At least maybe I'll harass, I'll try to find a plan to that. But my economic focus is going to be on the right side of the map where I can control. And it's super important to make those decisions intelligently. And that's exactly one of the most important things happening in this game. At this exact moment, you could very easily argue that Polt is ahead, right? He has this position is very strong. If you take a look at upgrades, currently Polt is 3-2 versus 2-2, and Polt is about to be 3-3 with the third attack on mech, whereas Ryung's his armor's only halfway done, and he hasn't even started his attack yet because he lost his second eBay. So Polt's in a very strong position, but notice this command center. Moving over this way. This is a super important decision Polt makes, is that, remember how I said Polt has the entire left side of the map. Ryung, because these units are tied up here, Ryung could pretty easily take control of the right side of the map. But Polt's trying to expand on the right side of the map, and this is what's super important, is this decision that Polt makes to move over to the right side. I mean, it's hard to tell if he can control the right side and left side, he wins. But look at the army sizes here. As they both fight for the right side, because Polt, instead of hanging back here and just defending a choke point, he tries to move forward. Look at the units, right? So Polt has 18 Marines here and 4 siege tanks, right? And a bunch of medevacs. So both players have a bunch of medevacs, roughly equal. Whereas Ryung has 52 Marines here. Each page is 24, so 2 pages 48. Another 4 is 52. And he's got, that's not even, actually, that was 52 without even counting some of these guys back up here. And he might not have as many tanks, but the basic idea is he's got well over twice as many Marines, which are, there's not so many tanks that they're as important. So he's going to easily be able to collaborate his force. And now all of a sudden, you know, yes, there's a few extra Marines actually here. But so many Marines from Ryung, he conquers the bottom right, and that was inevitable. Given the fact that Ryung's force was closer to the bottom right, and that Polt tied up more units over here than that had to move all the way up here, whereas Ryung's units that are tied up here could be rallied out very easily. Ryung now controls the bottom right, and because Polt tried to take this bottom right base, he then lost the battle here and then lost this choke point as well. And this is super important, because instead of controlling the left side of the map, he tried to immediately take the right side when he wasn't quite strong enough to do so. And now instead of being ahead, now he's behind, right? Ryung's got 200 supply, and he's got basically a good chunk of the map. He can deny the third of Polt pretty effectively with the siege tank line. Polt can try to fight for it, but with this siege tank line, it's so difficult. Right now, Ryung's fighting out here, but it's quite a simple matter if you think about this. The siege tanks of Ryung, from this position right here, they control basically a line like something like this, right? So all Ryung has to do is just pull these Marines. He could pull a small chunk back down, and then the rest of the guys can just head back that way, and it's pretty simple, right? These units can cover the tanks from being dropped on. This small force can heal a third base. Anytime Polt's Marines try to threaten these Marines, they back up to the protection of siege tanks. It's almost impossible for Polt to defend this location unless he can break the siege tank force, which is doable, but to do so means he'd have to recall his troops in the top. He basically have to recall everything to take out this force, and he's still on 3 bases, right? So is it worth giving up the entire left side of the map to risk reestablish 3 bases when his opponent is already on 4? It's a very tough decision. Either way, Ryung's in a great position here because he was able to take that right side of the map, and Polt tried to fight him for it when he wasn't quite ready enough. So we can see here exactly Ryung's backing these units up. Then he can easily send 1 Marine. He could have sent a couple down here. You can even grab a few in a drop, harass them as well, because these siege tank tanks, like I said, it's very restrictive for Polt to try to defend this location. And sooner or later, as soon as Ryung brings in a few more units, he can go ahead and grab 2 tanks and put them on the high ground here, or 2 tanks even close. He's inching his way in to get more and more of a lock on this 3rd base. And of course, the 4th base, Polt tried to take at the bottom right. There's no way he can take this base with Ryung cutting it off from the rest of the world. Exactly like I said here, now these Marines are going to take down this base, and Polt has to give up this location. Unless he wants to try to break the siege tank line, which you can see right now, he just scanned it. He said, can I break this? He sees more Marines coming forward here. He knows it'd be extremely cost inefficient. So now he decides, okay, it's time to back away and take the left side of the map like I probably should have done a little while ago. So we're just going to times 80 for the next couple of minutes. That's exactly what's going to happen. Ryung, of course, has his 3rd base, plus he's got the entire right side of the map to do what he wants with, whereas Polt is still trying to establish a new 3rd here, and then anytime he wants to, get probably take this top left. Very, very important to go ahead and take that top left. So we're just going to times 80 for the next couple of minutes as both players are positioning. Ryung's backing his forces up a bit. And one thing I want to talk about right here, I'm going to pause it and talk about how to choke out the map from your opponent. Ryung had an advantage, but it wasn't enough he could charge into a siege tank line, right? But the important part about Neoplanet S, and any map in particular, is identifying the key choke points on the map that really control the map. And so if you notice what Ryung just did, is he backed up and focused his control on 2 locations. This location and this location. If he can hold both those X's in a TVT situation on this map, several things happen. 1, you can pretty easily control the middle, right? And even if you get dislodged a bit, maybe your opponent can sneak in and harass the middle. So the middle is kind of hard, but you can periodically take the middle and force your opponent to worry about denying the middle. It's pretty hard to hold the middle long term, but you can kind of take it and drop mules and try to do what you can in the short term. But most importantly is look at the routes these X's have. If you control these zones, you can easily get to the bottom right. You can easily get to the top left. You can easily attack any potential 4th base of your opponent, or you can attack it right here. Remember, if you had this position, you can control that bottom base. So with very short movements, you can threaten so many of your bases. Basically, your opponent can only have their first 2 bases safe. And in a late game, those are already mined out. So it's very easy to position your units here, and you have so much control. On the other side of your opponent, if they try to defend this top left base, for example, even if they have this base over here, the only way they can beat you to this siege location on the top left is if their army is right here. And if their army is right there, well, it's quite simple. You just go down here and take this location. And then you've isolated them from all the reinforcements, right? If you take this location over here. So if you can control both these 2 ridges on Neoplanet S in the TVT game, and you play it patiently, you've already choked off your opponent from basically having more than 3 bases. It's almost impossible for him to take more than 3 bases if you can control both these locations. So that's exactly what Ryung decided to do. Played a little bit of a slower game and choke off his opponent very, very effectively. And now, what does Polt do from here, right? Well, Polt has to find one of these ridges to push back. Because if he can't control this ramp, again, he can't take the top left. And same thing with the bottom right. Now, this is where Ryung maybe makes a little bit of a mistake, because he really tries to make another move in this space. And this space isn't that important. Yes, Ryung can easily take this, but while he's busy taking this location out, in fact, actually Polt has enough Marines, he might even just swarm him over. Although he backs away because he realizes, you know what? It wouldn't be that cost efficient to take this army out, and there's no need. This location isn't that important. The most important location is this spot right here. So as soon as I'm sure that this army can't be a threat, all I can do is try to fight over this location. And now that Ryung's lost some units here, I can go and try to take this spot. And we can see that right here. Polt's mobilizing his forces. He's going to move out here. And Ryung had to give up this location just by a little bit. Backing up here means he can't control this important ridge. If he can't control this important ridge, it makes it much harder to control the bottom right. And now he's in that situation where, okay, I still have control most of the map. The top left is under my control. And I've got this middle base. This will die as soon as my opponent really wants to kill it. But he can't kill this middle base and a bottom right at the same time because they're both this one assumed to be planetary. They're both planetaries, and it takes an opponent's full attention to take out a planetary. And because I have so many bases, I can just sacrifice this, and I'll try to establish a position over here. And this is actually insanely important. One aspect right here, Ryung's winning. But before we close this out, I want to remind you guys one really important thing. If you're a Terran player and you're sieging an opponent's planetary fortress, what's super important, you constantly pay attention. That's why Ryung scanned here, because all your tanks will automatically attack the planetary fortress, and it'll keep attacking it forever. And so that is exactly what Polt is trying to do right here. He's moving these siege tanks up. And these siege tanks will kill all of Ryung's siege tanks if Ryung doesn't notice and change his target. To manually change the target, or else they'll keep attacking the planetary fortress forever. And so that's exactly what Ryung just did there. He changed his target manually using the scan to focus down those tanks, and also you can use it to focus on SCVs if SCVs get too close as well. So very, very heads-up play dealing with that PF. And then from here on out, if he can control this position, again, control this position, make sure that Polt can't take the middle base. Polt's only mine base is his left side. If he keep the attention directed on the left side here, then all of a sudden the right side becomes vulnerable. And all he has to do is look for trades like this, right? He was fine abandoning those tanks because he knew his opponent would have to abandon his tanks. And trading even for even is all Ryung wants because, again, he's got 4 or 5 bases against an opponent who's really only on 4. And that base up is huge. Plus, Ryung, as long as he keeps a threat here, he can go ahead and take this top left base anytime he wants. So let's times 8 this for the next 2 minutes to see the closing Nemesis location. You can see here, Ryung, again, he's perfectly willing to trade out this bottom right base. Like I said, it'll distract his opponent as long as he can take out this left side base. Because trading a base for a base, 4 bases to 3, his opponent's going to mine out, and all of a sudden he's going to win the war of attrition. We'll just stop it here. He's 200 food against the opponent's 170, and if you look at the amount of income here, he's got significantly more workers than his opponent. He's got twice as many, and he has a place to drop mules. Whereas right now neither of them has great economy. But given another minute or two, as soon as Ryung decides to drop mules, he can have any money he wants because he has a base to mine from. Polt has no such thing. This is a really awesome game. I kind of breezed through a lot of it. It was a 45-minute game. They had game 1, too, which I didn't show. Game 1 was on Akon Waste, another 45-minute game. Both are some of the best TVT games I've seen. So go ahead, check this out, youtube.com/official MLGSC2 to catch the full games and everything that happened there. But the important aspects of this game are to understand a couple key things. One is how important map vision is in TVT. You have to know if your opponent is crossing your half the map or if they're staying on their side of the map. The other thing that's extremely important is knowing which bases to expand to given the current state of map control. Polt had an advantage on most of this game. Ryung took a big advantage because Polt tried to expand to the bottom right, whereas his safety expansions, his map control, was all on the left side of the map. So he should have stuck to there because he tried to take the bottom right. That was Ryung's zone of control, and Ryung just stomped that expansion, moved in, and took a dominant chokehold on the map because of that little fiasco over there. And also, last but not least, you need to make sure you're constantly patient. So wherever you have a chokehold, be patient and slowly choke your opponent out. There's no need to just rush in there. Do exactly what Ryung did. Said, you know what? If my opponent only has 1 key base on the left side, that's fine. I don't need to run in there and kill it. I can just slowly make sure he takes no more bases, control the middle of the map, mine a lot of extra money, and then once I have a big advantage, I can just start throwing stuff at him and win the war of attrition. But until then, until I got the economic advantage, just be patient with the map control for about 10 minutes, get a lot of extra money, and then go in to end the game. This wraps up our first segment. We'll take a short break and be right into our second segment, another matchup between Ryung and Polt, this time on Belshir Vestige.